How do you switch from playing football in high school to competing in weightlifting? What are the best exercises for shoulder health in Olympic lifting? And how can you get over a mental block with snatches? In episode 25 of the Last Set Best Set podcast, Coach Calvin and I dive deep answering these questions and more. And if you want your question answered on next week's episode, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. Welcome back to the Last Set Best Set podcast. I'm Coach Brian, the owner of Big Ben Strength, and I've been teaching Olympic lifting for 11 years now.
I am Coach Calvin. I am current captain of Lindenwood University's Olympic weightlifting program, as well as a coach through Big Ben Strength and National University champion, actually.
Let's go. And today we're going to be answering some questions that you guys submitted to us. But first, we're actually really excited to announce that July 23rd through the 27th, Calvin and I will be hosting a training camp this summer in Tallahassee, Florida at our gym, Red Hills CrossFit. So we're going to have some more details coming out about that soon, and you should be able to register down in the description below, but make sure to save that date. Let's go and get into question number one here. I've played football all through high school. I'm graduating soon and now want to compete in weightlifting. Any tips? So great question. One that actually I've been kind of thinking about a lot more recently because I've just been seeing a bunch of really great football players turn into great weightlifters. So wanted to kind of outline this because I've also been working with a former football player as well. So let's get into it. So like I said, it's becoming more and more common to see football players making that transition from weightlifting and being from football and being very successful. So off the top of my head, we've got Colby Ferguson, Aaron Williams, Wes Kitts, all huge weightlifters who have made the transition and done very well. But there's a few things that we kind of want to go over because coming from football, you have a large background in strength and conditioning, but it's got some slight nuances that are different than Olympic weightlifting. Starting with technique is the biggest thing. So what are some things that you see with technique that a lot of football players need to spend some time on?
Yeah, so usually people come into football and they do have experience with the clean. Some are even lucky and have a little bit of experience with the jerk. Very few have experience with the snatch. So we're likely going to see a big deficit in technique between the three movements, depending on what you've been doing before. Mm-hmm. And specifically with the cleans that they were doing, you might see them only doing power cleans or only doing hang cleans. So they might have no concept of what a lift off the floor should even look or feel like. So that's a huge thing that when it comes to actually switching over, that we're going to see a lot of athletes deal with. So thinking about the start position, the first pull, a lot of football players are going to rip it off the floor, probably have their hips shoot up quick, and maybe they're finishing good, but the only thing that really matters in a lot of these football players is fixing their first pull so that they can show off all that power they have in the second pull, in the transition portion of the lift. There's one metaphor that I like. I'm always telling my athletes this, is you don't want to slam your foot on the gas pedal as soon as the lift starts. Because in a nice, in a real car, what happens? You start spinning out. Same thing's going to happen in your lift if you try and go all at once. We want to slowly put our foot on that gas pedal, slowly pressing it down to the floor. And think about the effect that has on the car. It doesn't spin out. It slowly builds that speed. It accelerates. And that's exactly what we want to happen throughout the Olympic lift to maintain those positions. That's super, super key. So consistency is the goal here. That's kind of the other big part about football. To develop technique, you need to be lifting consistently. You need to be doing the snatch, doing the jerk twice a week. That's my recommendation always, at least twice a week for both of those movements. To really start getting your technique down. What about you, Brian? What's your recommendations for football technique?
Yeah, the thing that I found with a lot of football players is they have all of the drive and all of the motivation, and they will just do whatever you tell them to, which is like absolutely a coach's dream. And so what you want to do as the athlete is just make sure that you're listening to your coach when it comes to the technique stuff. It used to be that in football, the strength and conditioning stuff is just the stuff that you have to do but really the thing that you want to do is the playing of the football, right? The playing of the football. The important thing now is this is the sport. In the weight room is the sport. And so you have to be really particular watch your videos over and over again. Try and make sure that every single rep looks exactly the same. And so making sure that we're avoiding some kind of simple common mistakes like jumping forward in the snatch or in the clean. Or having poor footwork, moving our feet out too wide in the catch for the clean is a pretty common one. And then the last thing that I see as well is the jerk rack position. Typically, I'll see athletes do way too low of elbows, like they're going to do a push press or like they're going to do a strict press overhead. But realistically in the jerk, we want to have a little bit of a higher elbow position. So those are some of the big things. Just making sure that go back and watch the videos of your lifts and make them look as consistent as possible, and make sure you're not doing any of those kind of like earlier beginner style mistakes. So the next thing that we kind of want to take a look at here is mobility. Nobody really wants to work on mobility, but a lot of athletes, a lot of former athletes have a tough time with mobility. So especially coming from football, you're probably going to need some more shoulder and upper back mobility for the snatch and for the front rack position. A lot of people's front rack position is just super tight. They can't get that bar to rest on their shoulders. Maybe it's just because you got such big arms, but most often it's actually just a mobility issue. So we want to make sure that we're doing some stuff to get your front rack and your overhead position feeling a lot better. So some things that I really like doing for that: underhand dead hangs for that front rack position is such an easy, simple way to get a lot of progress out of that. And that's going to help stretch out the lats. It's going to get some rotation of the shoulder so you can keep your hands, like all of your fingers, under the bar when you're doing your cleans and your front squats. Some other things that will probably be helpful: dumbbell external rotations to kind of build up, again, that shoulder rotation so your front rack position feels strong. But some other things that you can do are front rack SOTS press. That is going to be really tough for a lot of you guys, more than likely, but it's going to get that upper back feeling super loose and mobile. And then just lots of front rack work, putting a barbell on the front rack position and just holding your positions there to get that feeling strong is going to be really, really important for you. Now, some other things that you might have to look at are things like squat depth. Coming from strength and conditioning, you may have a background more in box squats or low bar squats. So we're going to have to make sure that, one, with your strength work, you are switching over to a high bar squat. That's going to be very important for mimicking the positions in the snatch and clean and jerk, but that you're also training to a full depth. So if you have a background more in box squats or even squatting to like a med ball, something I see a lot, we want to make sure that we are squatting to full depth. So pause squats can be a really good tool for you, which kind of brings us into kind of the programming portion, which is the last thing that we want to pay attention to here. When it comes to programming, what are some things that you think of?
So, especially, I kind of mentioned this in the technique portion, for football players, they need to work off the floor. In fact, just most beginner weightlifters need to do a lot of work off the floor. It's very unlikely that you are the athlete that's perfect off the floor into the knee, and then everything falls apart above there. Most likely, people have problems everywhere when they start for a very long period of time. So I'm a big fan of doing basically all your work off the floor. So that is kind of not including blocks in your program for like probably the first like year or two of weightlifting entirely. You probably just don't need to and could see a lot of benefit from just still working on those floor positions more consistently. So the same thing kind of goes for some hang movements. Unless you're addressing something really specific that you kind of specifically really suck at in the above knee portion of the lift, then I just recommend just going off the floor. Working on that transition around the knee is something so many people need to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that you can do if you do need to work on that is take one of the progressions from the free beginner program where we're working on our positions. We can do the pulls. A lot of the time I'll start people off with doing the triple pause. So we'll pause an inch off the floor, pause at the knee, and then pause at the hip before we finish our extension. And then in the Olympic lifts, we'll do a double pause. So we'll pause at the knee position to work on our first pull, and then we'll pause at the power position again to make sure that we have the right transition from knee to hip. Those are some really valuable ones. And then slow pulls are really helpful because that's also going to help you work on rushing off the floor and not doing that. So that would be definitely some things that I would consider in your training there. And then, like I mentioned, the back squat, we got to make sure we're doing high bar back squats to full depth. I mean, the lowest possible depth that you can get to. while keeping midfoot balance and your torso relatively upright. Those are super important, and if you didn't do those a lot in high school, you're kind of got a little bit of catching up to do there. And then the last thing I would say to keep in mind there is we're probably gonna have to start building up some more overhead pressing strength. If you're somebody who didn't do a lot of jerks or push presses or overhead pressing in your strength and conditioning and mostly just did bench pressing, this is a weak point that we're going to have to build up a little bit. It's probably not too weak of a thing for you if you have a big bench, but it's definitely something that's going to come into play for sure. So make sure that we're doing some push pressing, make sure that we're doing jerks, and make sure that we're doing strict overhead presses. And then as far as accessories go, what are some things that you would think about for people?
Yeah, so the stuff that's targeting those overhead positions, like you talked about, a lot of times with football players, it's not like a strength issue, even overhead. Like they could probably strict press something similar to a really good weightlifter, but it's positionally. Maybe they're all the way out in front of their head, and they really can't have like a solid receiving position overhead for a jerk, for instance, where you need the head through and the upper back is doing a lot of that support. So I'm thinking things that target your upper back to open it up, and like I love a chin. I love putting chin ups and different pull up variations are great for teaching you how to move in that plane, as well as just some other general kind of core strength stuff. Sometimes football players won't know how to brace and stabilize in the same way that a seasoned weightlifter would. So it's all stuff that you can work on there. But in the end of the day, kind of the message I want to hit home a second time is that consistency is going to be your kind of best friend here. So you need to take these things that we're recommending here and apply them, once, twice a week over a long, long period of time. You're not going to be able to rush this progress. So when that comes down to programming, don't snatch every day because your snatch is worse than your clean. We want to be doing twice a week, maybe 3 times a week, if you're really poor at the snatch. But you just need to have way more reps. Reps is the key here. When it comes down to programming, we see the best weightlifters, the highest correlation we can look at, who's done the most reps over the most amount of time. I can tell you somebody that's done 10,000 reps is a lot better than someone who's done 1,000 reps of the snatch. So it's just about getting those in over time, and your efficiency and technique develops throughout that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last part of this that I want to finish off on is, I know it sounds like there's a lot of work that has to be done, and there is, but the important thing to remember is that you do have an advantage here. You have so much more athletic prowess than a lot of people coming into weightlifting who maybe have never done a sport before. So just athletic general awareness is a huge advantage for you, but you also likely have a ton of power. So, while we don't have the ability to display that with our technique quite yet, once you get that technique down, you're going to make big jumps in your improvement. So I know it sounds maybe a little overwhelming at first, but if you spend that first year really getting your technique down, you're probably going to be able to make some huge progress after that. So keep that in mind there. Up next, we discuss which exercises you should do for shoulder health, but first, I'm excited to announce the dates for our 3rd annual summer training camp. This summer, Coach Calvin and I want to invite you to come train with us in Tallahassee, Florida from July 23rd through the 27th. We'll have double-day workouts, a visit to the FSU Sports Performance Lab, an ice bath, breathing, and sauna workshop, and of course, 2 exciting max-out sessions on Saturday. You'll have the option to come in for the full 5-day experience, just visit for the weekend, or if you can only make one day work, you can pick a day pass for any of the days. You can grab your spot and save $50 on registration when you use the discount code LASTSETPOD at checkout. All right, back to the show. Question number 2, what are the best exercises for shoulder health in weightlifting? Kind of an interesting question here. So, we do a lot of shoulder work just in weightlifting. Jerks, snatches, even cleans are taxing to the shoulders with that turnover. We do need to make sure that we're prioritizing shoulder health. And one of the biggest things that I found that does that is a strong upper back, especially more than probably any other thing. But it is important too that when we're choosing our exercise, we want to make sure that we are training through all planes of motion. So we're not just moving up and down, which is what we do a lot in weightlifting, but we're also pulling and pressing front to back and doing any sort of rotation or anti-rotation work. So what are some exercises that you think of that would probably be really helpful for people here?
Yeah, I think let's even use you a bit as an example here, because
Yeah.
you had been dealing with some pretty bad shoulder pain,
Yeah.
so much so to the point that you couldn't even really snatch the bar without pain, right?
Right.
And so we'll just use an example. We'll take the exact progression that I used with you, that has seemed to be kind of helpful, and we'll just talk about that. So basically, Brian could do cleans, squats, front squats, all like with no shoulder pain. But those overhead movements, the snatches and the jerks, really kind of brought up some of that pain.
Hmm.
And so it's hard to get into that if maybe even a strict press is hurting,
Yeah.
like was the case for him. So we kind of have to regress to the point that he's at. You got to meet somebody where they're at. So for Brian, we had to start as much as like body weight or very light dumbbell IYTs. So usually the way I set this up is either fully face down on a bench or an inclined bench. You'll do an I with your arms. You'll do an I, which is out to kind of straight up, then a Y, there we go, and then a T, which is to the sides there. And this is just going to light up your upper back like crazy, but likely be light enough that it's a good entry point. So you can get some training in. This is the goal, is to get training and not to cut out everything.
Absolutely.
We want to find that point where Brian can enter, where anybody with shoulder pain can enter into the upper body exercises like that, overhead exercises, with not necessarily zero pain. That's the important part here. We don't want something so light and so ineffective that you can't even really feel it at all. We want it to be maybe slight. I'm just talking, 1, 2, or 3 out of 10 pain, to where you can push through and you get better for the next session still, but it's not injuring you further. So kind of what we did is we focused on using those IYTs for a period of time, until kind of you could handle some more pressing movements. I think we went into dumbbell press, right?
Yeah, we did dumbbell presses with pretty lightweight. I've barbell press 90 or 198, which is it's a pretty solid overhead press. But I was doing dumbbell presses with like 25s, 20s, 20-pound dumbbells like those. And it feels like you're not doing that much. But then, if you do 3, 4, 5 sets, build up the volume over time on it, and then you can start adding a little bit of weight to it over time. I mean, now I'm back up onto a barbell pressing, which is great. But I was able to get up to the point where I was pressing 50s for multiple reps, which is great. It's a lot better than where it was. And so, yeah, so those IYTs really got me feeling good. And then the dumbbell presses after that have been just progressing pretty nicely. And so I think those are also very important for sure.
Yeah. So emphasis here, the key is not a certain exercise. So
Hmm.
like, we get this question a lot too. What exercises are best for the clean and jerk, for the snatch? And it's kind of
Yeah,
like, well, clean and jerk and snatch. I mean, it's not really. There's not an exercise fix to shoulder pain.
right.
There's a progression fix.
Hmm.
Same thing goes for the clean and jerk and the snatch. You got to find a way to program it and progress it, to where it increases over time. The same thing goes for shoulder health, but in a much smaller scale kind of way, where we have to find your entry point and progress you from there. It's going to be completely individual to where you're at. Maybe you can do strict presses just fine, so that looks a little different. But jerks hurt, or split jerks hurt, so you have to do power jerks, so you do push presses, so switching it up in a certain way to where you can slowly build back in. Too many people have the mindset of, oh, I'll take 2 weeks off from overhead movement, then come back and do it all again. And that is a recipe for getting hurt again, for being, not making progress. So you have to find a way to slowly progress yourself back into where you want to be.
Absolutely. And so, now to not completely dodge the question about exercises that could be good for shoulder health, A couple good things just to keep in mind. Like, again, we talked about you want to train in all the planes of motion. So figuring out where your entry point is, especially if you've got an injury, is important. Maybe that just means that the only sort of shoulder exercise that you can do is a dumbbell row, right? If that's the weak point for you and you need to build up some upper back, that's going to be good. Some of the things that could be really helpful to experiment with are overhead carries. If I had an athlete who couldn't press or hold any weight here, but he could support weight overhead. For 2 months, all we did was overhead carries, and we did jerk recoveries, and we did bottom up overhead squats, and just built up the progression on those until the shoulder got healthy enough. And he came right back into weightlifting and then set a state record on the clean and jerk. It was one of the cooler things that I've ever seen, with almost no snatch or jerks in his training leading up to that competition. So overhead carries, I would say, don't underestimate them. They can be a really good way to progress into more advanced shoulder exercises for sure. So definitely give those a try. But if you've got any sort of pain or injury, just make sure that you consult with a doctor. Like that's the important thing here for sure. Up next, we cover some strategies you can use to overcome a mental block. But first, I wanted to let you know about the OlyStrong team. The OlyStrong team is my online coaching option for lifters looking to improve their technique, get strong, and set PRs. It includes your choice of 3 or 5 days a week of workouts, daily video feedback, and unlimited coach messaging to ask as many questions as you'd like for less than $1 a day. If you're ready to get started, then click the link in the description below for a free week trial today. Question number 3. Any tips for getting over a mental block with snatches? My best is 100, but for some reason when I get to 85, I just clark it. It's tough. Mental blocks are probably one of the more frustrating things that you can deal with in the sport. And I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and I've got a couple things that will probably help. So the first thing that I would recommend, one, is high volume. Practice making lifts. If you're doing high volume, you're probably not going to be able to go very heavy. That's okay. You may not even be getting up to that 85-pound mark where you're clarking it. But doing a high volume of training where you're just getting into the habit of making lifts, especially if you're doing the next thing, which is higher reps, how the last rep of a triple feels is pretty similar to how a heavier single feels. Broadly, so if you are just getting into the habit of making lifts in those higher rep schemes and higher volume, you're going to get into the habit of making lifts, which is good. But you're also going to kind of learn how to develop some of that grit that you need to have for an aggressive second pull instead of just kind of chickening out and clarking it in that second pull. So that's 2 things that I would recommend for your programming that has really helped a lot of my athletes get through some mental blocks. What are some other things that you think about here?
I like EMOMs for people that overthink.
Oh yeah,
it
that's
just
great.
takes away the time to overthink the lift. So I've done that with one of our athletes at our Lionheart Weightlifting Club program here in St. Charles, Missouri, and that has kind of worked wonders with her. We were doing all singles and doubles, and she would just like something I don't know. She was overthinking the movement. And even if we're telling her, don't think, like she's still thinking about something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very hard on her lifts. But when we put an EMOM restriction on her, we were like, "Whoa, who is this? We've never seen this lifter before. Like, this is crazy." Like,
I've seen that exact thing help so many people who are overthinkers. So, if that's you, on the minute training where you set a running clock, I do on the minute where we take a lift at the beginning of every minute. I know you do it with a minute of rest in between.
Yeah.
They all function. They all solve the same problem, which is giving you less time to overthink. And then also you're going to be a little bit out of breath. And so you may not be thinking quite as much because of a little bit of the fatigue too. But it's still an effective way to get some good technique work in. But that brings in really a good point, which is, don't overthink your technique. There is a time for technique work, and there is a time for thinking about your technique a lot. And then there's a time to not do that. If you're pulling with too much control off the floor, or you're really trying to think about your first pull or your second pull, and maybe you're worried about going too fast, more than likely you're probably just thinking so much about doing it right that you're not being aggressive enough. Do all of that thinking with your lighter weights as much as possible so that you build a good habit of doing that most of the time anyway. And then when it gets to heavier times, it is time to be aggressive with your lifting. It is not time to try and be controlled or really just thinking about your technique a whole lot. So, try as much as you can, find different ways to eliminate the overthinking. Another tip that I found is to just skip the trouble weights entirely. If you're somebody who struggles at 85, then do 83 and 86. Just don't do 85 at all. 1 kilo won't make much of a difference in the training program, but it will help you make sure you're not going crazy from missing lifts all the time. So that is just one thing. It doesn't necessarily solve the problem, but it gets you past that sticking point. And if it can get you past the sticking point, you can hopefully progress your numbers up, and then you won't have that mental block at 85 if you're snatching 125. Oh, yeah. And then
here's a fun one that I kind of like. If you normally lift in pounds, find somewhere where you can go lift in kilos. If you normally lift in kilos, find someone where you can lift in pounds, and don't even count it. Just start adding weight. Just go for the feeling, not for the actual weight that's on there. You can kind of recreate this. It's a little harder in the Olympic lifts, but we've done it on squatting because we had one athlete that was really kind of mental blocked around 100 kilos on squat. It was a woman, and we put hoodies over the weights. Loaded.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Put hoodies over it, and she hit a squat PR that day because she wasn't thinking about the scary 100 kilo triple digit number.
Right.
So I've seen this done with trash bags on the Olympic lifts.
Yep.
Not exactly practical if you're in a commercial gym or a normal gym, but if you're in a good training environment, you feel comfortable doing that. Maybe it's worth a try to surprise yourself.
If I remember correctly, back a long time ago, I think Dr. Mike Stone in Tennessee did a study on this, and it is like very universally very helpful. So if you can't see what the weights are, you can't overthink it, and that is pretty helpful. And then the last thing that I want to point out here is just make sure that you're visualizing. I think not enough people appreciate the how much visualizing your lifts helps a lot. Spend time practicing the lifts in your head. Picture the weights on the bar. Picture the weights with the biggest plate possible on the bar if you're somebody that's scared of the big plates. And then just picture your setup. Picture the execution of the lift over and over and over again so that, even if you're not physically able to get all the reps in, you can still mentally get lots of reps in. And I've heard stories of high international level lifters doing this weeks out from competition when they couldn't train because of an injury. And it's still working. So that there is power to it for sure. Highly recommend it. Up next, we shout out a few lifters you need to know about, but first, a quick word from Calvin.
Hey guys, quick interruption to the video to tell you about my 12-week weightlifting program. This program is something I put a lot of time and effort into, so be sure to go check it out. The program takes you through a few weeks of volume, strength phase, and then finally ends off with a peaking phase, ending out the program. It comes with a demo video showing you how the program works, how to use it, as well as exercise videos for all the complexes that are used throughout the program. Be sure to go check it out down below, and let's get back into the video.
Let's go ahead and get into the shout out portion of our podcast. If you guys don't know, we shout out 4 lifters who are killing it in their training, whether they're putting up big numbers, whether they're making serious technique improvements, whether it's an impressive lift on the international stage, doesn't matter. We just want to shout out some lifters who maybe are underappreciated. So my first shout out, have you seen this dude Luke Lifts on TikTok?
No, I don't think I have.
No, he's a 170-pound high school weightlifter, so he's about 77 kilos. He'd be in the 81 kilo weight class here in Florida. He's got like 300 followers, but he snatched 260 pounds, and it's like 119 kilos in high school is crazy. Hitting around like 120 kilo snatches in 81 used to be just like you were the top dog in the country. Like you were one of the biggest lifters in the country at the youth and junior level. Pretty rare to see many other people pushing beyond that. But especially not from high school, like Florida high school weightlifters. Maybe if you had like a rare high school weightlifter who also did USA weightlifting, that would be the case. But I just wanted to shout him out because this lift is pretty insane. And like he's got no followers, but he's putting up some of the biggest lifts in the country. It's pretty impressive. And his technique looks great, man. I would not be surprised to see if he's got a 275-pound snatch in his future. I don't know what he's clean and jerking right now, at least.
Okay. Well, I'm sure I'll find out. I'm actually going to the Florida High School State Champs. It'll be the week that this podcast comes out, so that's somebody I'll be sure to keep my eye out for, and I'll be running a booth there. So, Luke, if you're watching this, come say hi.
Yeah, for sure. And anybody else who's going to boys state championships, go say hi to Calvin and check out the USA weightlifting booth and everything that they're doing. All right, who's your next shout out?
All right, my first lifter is an American weightlifter snatching 387 pounds, 176 kilos, at about 210 pounds, mid-90s body weight. So your ears should be perked up and listening to this because that's an insane lift.
Yeah.
This is Derek Beauchamp. He's an absolute monster. He's also doing a 220 kilo jerk, 485 pounds, almost a 500-pound jerk at this body weight is that's all-time kind of numbers. To put that in perspective, if I'm thinking about like modern era weightlifting, just if any body weight jerking above 220 kilos for Americans, maybe 15 people max.
Ever.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, Brian, but can you even think of somebody under 100 kilos body weight that's done a 220 jerk or clean and jerk?
I genuinely can't. I think that, maybe the only people that could possibly have done it were Nathan Damron, but I've only ever seen him in the 210, maybe 215 range. I don't think I've ever seen 220.
Yeah.
And then, Kendrick Ferris might have done it, but I genuinely don't know.
Yeah. There's this is above 100 that come to mind. Even a few of them are current lifters right now, but
yeah,
below 100, no.
I don't know why more people are not talking about this guy. These are insane training lifts.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and he used to compete for the USA, so he did one international comp, I believe.
Yeah, he did Pan Ams, I think.
Yeah, and I think he did 160 snatch, 177 clean and jerk as an 89. So not like otherworldly numbers there. Some stuff we've seen from Damron and that kind of likes of him as well. But it seems like in these few years off, he's made quite a lot of progress. He doesn't have Instagram, so go check him out on TikTok at Bo Derek. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. These are crazy numbers. All right, let's go ahead and get into the next shout out here. Do you know Evan Garrett?
I have seen a lot of his lifts. Yeah.
He's a 65 kilo lifter out of Garage Strength, which is I think 150 pounds, somewhere around there. With a 260, 119 kilo snatch and a 145 or was that 319 kilo or 319 pound clean and jerk. One thing I want to point out in this lift is his pull on the 145 clean and jerk, especially. That bar is coming off the floor so slow. And you mentioned that somebody from Marquette?
Yeah, Christoph, I believe, is just his name. But he does biomechanics analysis for weightlifting, and he said that this is one of the slowest pulls he's seen from any athlete.
It's just so crazy. When somebody has a slow pull like this, you're there's no way they're gonna get under this. It kind of reminds me of Hyson Palaku, which is probably one of the greatest, my favorite lifts of all time, at least. His 211 kilo clean jerk, where he just barely breaks it off the floor. But it just kind of goes to show that, man, if that bar is coming up off the floor slow, it doesn't matter. If you have the grit and you have the tenacity for it, and you are fast, you can get under anything and stand it up. And so I just wanted to shout out Derek I wanted to shout out Evan because, he's putting up some great lifts, and I really admire the grit of this clean and jerk, especially, and just got to shout out Garage Strength because they're always cranking out just top tier weightlifters.
Oh yeah, for sure. Top tier culture, top tier lifters. All right, so my second shout out. Have you ever hit a lift crazy good and then you realize you ran out of storage or you forgot to record? Luckily, that's not a problem here in Hampton Morris's gym, as the ring camera was able to capture this awesome moment by my teammate James Tice. James jumped 11 kilos for a PR double. So he jumped from 130 kilos to 141 kilos. So 310 pounds in the snatch here. Does the first rep, good. Does the second rep, good. Sets it down, starts walking away. I'm like, why don't you do a third? I'm just messing around. Turns around, just picks up the bar again. Third rep, 141. It's crazy work, and his PR is only 155 kilos, so that's like a 91% triple. That's
I am blown away.
yeah.
That's insane. And also to just hit him with the give me another one and just to immediately do it. That's crazy. Because it's a PR double. Not that's insane.
Yeah, big lift from Big Jimmy James up from North Dakota. So props to him. Good job.
All right, guys, that is it for this week's episode. If you are a lifter that deserves a shout out, make sure to tag us in the comments on your videos, tag us in your stories when you're posting your lifts, because we want to see it. So, Calvin, where can people find you?
You can find me at Calvin Lackey 81kg on all platforms.
And you guys can find me at Big Ben Strength on every platform. Make sure to check out our programs and videos linked in the description below. We'll catch you guys next week. Bye.